And I'm Anna Jowahare.
And on this episode of the Reclaiming the Garden podcast, we have this amazing interview with YouTubers Angel and Nicole. You know, I found their YouTube account in October 2018, and it was just so great to see this like queer couple that was also like very, very deep in their faith, convicted in their faith, and like talking about their life together. And then, you know, I actually was able to like sort of meet them and befriend them. March 2020, the pandemic happened, and then they had to this like sort of LGBTQ group that they were leading in person along with their pastor friend Bailey Bronner. It had to go online because, you know, people couldn't meet in person, and so then I came, and it was such a great experience to like build that community there. And so definitely like doing this interview was just kind of surreal. It was like, oh my gosh, I get to like interview these people that I so deeply admire and inspire me a lot. And I got to learn more about them, you know, stuff that they haven't really talked about in their YouTube channel, and sort of how they started their sort of ministry regarding like LGBTQ and faith and nature, and their sort of backgrounds. It was just all really interesting to learn about.
Yeah, I loved all the different rabbit holes we were able to go down with this one. So
and all the funny the funny anecdotes, and also the really shocking ones. Like, oh my god, the homophobia that they face at their university. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, y'all are gonna listen to this. It'll be great. Simply put, we're very excited for this interview, and we are absolutely elated with how much fun it was, and we're so excited to share it with you.
Angel and Nicole are a queer couple based in San Diego, California. After meeting and falling in love while attending a Christian university, Angel and Nicole felt the call to provide spaces of acceptance and love to those who are seeking to reconcile their faith and their sexuality. Over the years, they created The One Frontier, a hybrid of both digital and in-person ministry initiatives that seek to empower and equip queer people with resources to aid them on their journey to find the space where faith, sexuality, and gender collide. Outside of their work in ministry, Angel and Nicole are active in wildlife conservation and documentary media, focusing on saving threatened marine species and other endangered animals. Angel and Nicole, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are so excited to have you, and this feels like really like a sort of full circle moment for me, because I remember, I think it was like in October 2018 that I first found your YouTube channel, and I was like, oh my gosh, these guys are so cool. So it's just wild to be able to like interview you, and of course I would also find it wild, like, you know, to tell myself 3 years ago, like, you're gonna have a podcast about queer.
Yeah, true. Well, thank you for having us on. We're really excited.
Yeah. So I guess we start off with the same sort of thing we tell all our guests, to sort of share the story of their faith backgrounds. And I know for both of you guys, you sort of had different experiences of Christianity, so.
Yeah, and please feel free to take us down, like, whatever rabbit holes you want to go down as well.
Do you want to go first? Yeah. So, hi, I'm Nicole, and my faith background is quite the rabbit hole. It's pretty intensive, so we'll start there. My family grew up pretty, like, on, like, two sides of the spectrum. Like, my mom was, like, pretty, like, progressive Christian, but then my dad was pretty conservative Christian, and so at my mom's house, you know, I had a really good, like, solid foundation, I think, like, growing up for, like, maybe how the world works, and, like, how to make sense of the world within, like, a religious sort of, like, context, and I would say she has a pretty, like, healthy Christianity to this day, but then my dad is very, like, black and white. He's very, like, the Bible needs to be taken literally at every opportunity that you can take it literally. It should be taken literally. And he also comes from a very like Calvary Chapel like framework. Like he's from that denomination. And so they are literalists, and they're like really conservative. Like, I won't get into all of the things that make them really conservative, but they're just, you should just look into them as a denomination if you want to.
Oh, I'm very familiar.
Yeah. There's actually a whole like Instagram account now that points out the things that Calvary Chapel has done, and be like, hey, this.
But you know what's cool? You know what's cool? It was actually like the whole movement was kind of kickstarted by a gay man. So
yes, yeah, yeah. That's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because I've been talking with people that have similar backgrounds in this denomination, and we all talk about how crazy it is that it was basically started by a gay man. And
His name, for our listeners who do not know what we're talking about, Lonnie Frisbie. There's a documentary about him called Frisbie. Unfortunately, it's made by someone who's not affirming, and so they don't present his sexuality in a good light, I think. But it still is cool to see his whole story. He also he also, another cool part of his story, he tripped on acid and then saw Jesus or he was reading the Book of John while he was high.
Oh my gosh! I haven't seen the documentary, but I have heard of some of these things, and that I actually didn't know that. So thank you for sharing. But yeah. So that's where a lot of my background comes from. And I started to kind of deconstruct my faith in maybe high school. And I kind of went through this phase of not really wanting to go to church and still kind of being forced to go, and then kind of being told we as a family always serve at church, so you're gonna go whether or not you like it. And there was some of that there as well. And then a lot of the reasons that I started to deconstruct my faith was because there were just a lot of aspects to what my mom would say and then what my dad would say that wouldn't align and weren't matching up to me. So I just decided to do my own research, and I found that I actually really, really liked this idea of incorporating a universalist perspective, even at a really, really, really young age, or young-ish, probably 16. And so I started, I think, subconsciously to sort of shift my views into that perspective at probably 16. And then I got accepted into Grand Canyon University, and then that's whenever I actually was going to go there for nursing, and I was going to be a nurse. But then I ended up switching out of that because cadavers are not the vibe for me.
Gotcha.
I thought about it. I was like, can't do this for another 4 years. This is not going to work. And so I switched into worship arts, which is where I met Angel. And Angel and I met and deconstructed and reconstructed our faith together. I would say within those 4 years, and even till today, we're still in that deconstruction, reconstruction period, because I don't know that it really ever ends.
Yeah.
But we're pretty right now, I would say our journey has kind of put us in place of we love Jesus. We think he's amazing. God is a woman. God doesn't.
Yeah.
And we're kind of in that space. But I also don't know that we would also call ourselves Christians, even though we believe in a Jesus figure, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. My journey just begins very differently from yours.
Let's hear yours.
Yeah. So I didn't really grow up Christian. Technically, I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
But I also grew up in a Chicago Italian family. So Catholic means that you just go to mass and then you don't think about it every other day of the week.
Gotcha.
I did also go through catechism. I didn't actually take my first communion because I was really over going to church. The incense they used in mass made me sick, so my mom was like, okay, you don't have to go anymore.
Nice.
Yeah, right. So other than that, I didn't really grow up Christian. I didn't really have a super strong faith background until high school, because I used to do musical theater in high school, and I started going to this, it was a whole thing in my life. I started going to this new community theater that was a little bit outside of my city, and I met all these new friends, and they all were super into going to this one Christian church. And so they invited me to come with them, and I started going, and my best friend at the time was really, really Christian and had invited me to her church a couple of times, but it never really stuck in the same way that this church did. And I started going to their youth group and got to see kind of worship leading for the first time, and I was like, oh, that looks like something that I could totally do, because I was in music, but I at this point I was kind of I don't think I want to do musical theater with my life anymore, but I still want to do music, but I don't know to what capacity. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And then also, like, of course, the faith part kind of kept going because, like, I had always believed in a God, and I generally believed in, like, the Christian God just because I'd grown up Catholic, and I would pray every now and then, things like that. But I think that after going to this Christian church in high school, like, my faith really, like, I guess, deepened, and I, like, got really into it. But I think even like all throughout my faith journey, even though I was like really into Christianity in high school and obviously like early college and stuff like that, since I was really young, I've always believed in reincarnation.
That's something that you've said this during the voyage, and I wanted to ask you about it during like, how did you come to that belief? Like, I'm really curious. So
yeah, so I don't know how I came to the belief because like I genuinely have just by default believed in reincarnation.
Like you came out of the womb this way.
Yeah, like I don't know, in my brain, like I just have always like thought like, oh, like we're gonna, and I don't know, it probably has to do with somebody saying something to me when I was like super young and it just like stuck and it landed and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so like even like getting into Christianity, like I still believed in reincarnation and I kind of didn't know how to like reconcile those two things, and like that was always like a weird thing. But then also at this same time that I was coming into Christianity, I was also realizing that I wasn't straight. So I started going through these two paths at the same time, which was like very strange, but also I like to tell people that like I wouldn't have had it a different way because I think that I got it kind of easy because people who started in the church before they figured out their sexuality often have it a lot harder because they have to undo a lot of stuff. But for me, I was building my Christian foundation with my sexuality, kind of. And did I still have hard times? Absolutely. And like I definitely still had like a lot of internalized homophobia and like fears about like, oh, am I sinning and all the typical stuff, but I think I had a slightly easier case of it. But yeah, like Nicole said, like now I think Christian is not necessarily the most like appropriate term that I would use to describe my spirituality, but it definitely still involves Jesus. It definitely still involves a lot of aspects of Christianity, but I really like even more so resonate with reincarnation now and practice-wise, we've adopted a lot of like outside practices in place of like going to church and things like that. But
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's pretty much our backgrounds.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And then you said you both went to Grand Canyon University, which is an evangelical university as far as I know. Yeah. What was that like, especially with both of your different faith into sexuality backgrounds, like meeting each other at a very evangelical university?
So I think it's worth noting that Grand Canyon University, before it was bought out, was actually about to go bankrupt as a Southern Baptist university. So it has super deep Southern Baptist roots, and then it was bought out and it was like became more evangelical. So Grand Canyon University, as long as you're not in a Christian program, is actually like pretty open,
like relatively liberal.
Yeah,
really,
it's like pretty reasonable. But then the second you enter into any sort of like Christian theology program,
which is where we were,
studies, which is where we were. They have you sign like a statement of faith, and it has all that stuff laid out in it about how you can't have sex before marriage, how you can't be in a relationship with someone of the same gender, or anything like that. So it's pretty in depth. So I would say our experiences vary a lot. I think they're very varied because you had a lot of opportunities taken away from you, Angel, but then I just kind of bopped around between different majors, so I never stuck with anything until maybe like my last year or so. Yeah. And so for me, it was more so like I just never felt comfortable with any of my professors even talking about any of this. Gotcha. And so, yeah, we have varied experiences in that way as well.
Yeah, I think so. For me, like we didn't come out publicly until the summer before junior year of college.
Senior year? Junior year?
The summer before junior year. We had 2 years of being out, 2 years in the closet, 2 years out. And so the first 2 years for me were very, very different than the second 2 years, because the first 2 years I was on the top of my game. I was kind of like climbing my way through the ranks in the worship arts program and getting all of these opportunities, and getting to be on like this like big opportunity called the Canyon Worship Album, which is like a select number of people that get to be on this album that they publish every year.
Oh wow!
I got on it both years, and getting into like the showcases and then also behind the scenes, the program was working with me and a couple of other people to actually get us opportunities outside of the program. Like I did have an opportunity lined up to play at Winter Jam, which was going to be like a huge thing.
Wow.
So lots of opportunities that never actually got to flesh themselves out because that summer before junior year, Nicole and I decided to come out publicly, and I lost not only all of those opportunities, but also almost all my friends, including one of those being my roommate and best friend since 4th grade, who just dropped me immediately. And then also, that being said, a lot of not all, but a lot of the professors were very outwardly homophobic. Like, I think that was probably like the worst part of it. Like for me, like if like obviously like you are going to a Christian university, you're gonna get some shitty like fellow students that are gonna like say stupid shit to you, and like that's just kind of how life goes. But like professors, you would think maybe would hold their tongue a little bit, like because they're in a professor position, but no. Like there's one class that I was in, it was called Psalms, Hymns, and Spiritual Songs, and I was kind of excited about it because I was like, oh, I bet we're going to be like learning the history, like the biblical history of like the Psalms and like the writers of the Psalms, and like, no, they basically had hired a pastor for this professor, and so he would just preach at us the whole time.
And it wasn't even, to give you perspective, this was a lot of GCU. It was less like academic lecture format based on whatever class you were in, and it instead became, they, created this wasn't just another weekly sermon for them that they were going to be giving this week. And so it was a lot more based around your individual faith and spirituality in a lot of ways than it was academically oriented, which made it really, really difficult as well.
Yeah, so I'm in this class, and it's this, like, pastor professor who's talking, and, like, I had kind of just, like, sat through his classes for the first, like, couple of months, and then, like, there was one day when he's talking about, like, okay, as worship leaders, when we're directors of a worship team, and we find out that someone on our worship team is doing something that they shouldn't, how do we, like, work with them to keep them on the team without firing them? And so he's talking about, like, these things, and then he very proudly goes, I've only ever had to kick off 2 people from my worship team, and both reasons were because of unrepented homosexuality. And I'm like,
what the hell?
That was a lot of words.
That was really uncalled for.
That was a lot of words. That was a lot of awful words. Like, what the fuck? Like,
wow.
So, like, things like that. And then also, like, the other, like, story that comes to mind is I was in a class where I was talking a lot about Christian media and, like, media and, like, Christianity and how, like, advertisements either work for or against Christianity. It was a really dumb class. I hated it. But this guy took one day to show us clips from TV shows like Modern Family or like
I had a teacher do this too.
Yeah, so he would just take these clips from shows that showed like gay couples just openly on TV, and he'd play like clips of them kissing and stuff like that, and he'd be like, "Look at how awful this is." And I was really lucky, and I had a couple of other gay people in this class. One of which I'm not going to say their name.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have a quick aside. Wait, Anna, have I shared the anecdote I have about my pastor like talking about how Glee is like a conspiracy for like the LGBTQ agenda?
Wait, we have to
No. What?
Okay, so it's summer camp, I think 2015. Church camp, of course, and there's a question and answer service as one of the evening activities, and someone is like, of course, asking, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? And like, I think he of course, the pastor quotes Leviticus, but then he also is like, well, there's like there's this effort to make it normalized, and he was like, well, there was this group of like Hollywood executives that met, and they were like, how do we advance the LGBTQ agenda in media and TV? And from that meeting came the TV show Glee. He said that in front of fucking hundreds of children. Like,
Wow, that is reaching new levels. Like, this is...
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that person also had, like, conspiracy theories around COVID.
Oh yes,
That
the church I grew up in opened in June 2020. They reopened in June 2020, and they took off their masks when they sang.
Oh my gosh.
Yikes.
Yeah, and like people that come up with those conspiracies, it's always that thing of like, tell me your life is incredibly boring without telling me. Because you have to come up with all of these like conspiracies of like, oh, it's an inside thing. It's like,
Right.
no, it's not. It's a TV show that was good, but in hindsight didn't age super well. Like, that's what Glee is.
Yeah.
Oh my
goodness. Wow, that's really... I didn't know about that. That's interesting. That's funny. Interesting conspiracy.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
yeah, I mean,
this...
that just reminds me of, like, what, your professor also did, like, that sort of showing, oh, look at this attempt to normalize in the media,
Oh, and he went even farther with it, too, because I was really lucky and I had other people who were in my class that were also gay, and also, if they weren't gay, there was a lot of people in that specific class who were, like, really liberal. Which wasn't the case in a lot of classes, but it was for that one. What I was going to say is that there's another queer Christian influencer that was in my class, which I didn't know that they were also queer at the time, but it was really nice. But so he, like, people started being like, well, why are you showing us this? Like, this isn't teaching us anything that was like said in the syllabus for this class. Like, this just seems unnecessary. And he got really offended that people were, like, saying that. So he goes up on the board, he starts drawing a tree. And he's like, this is the tree of life. And starts talking about, like, some weird nonsense with Adam and Eve and, like, a tree. And then everyone's still like, this is still not what we signed up for. Like, this is not what this class is about. And then he goes, okay, well, how about with a show of hands, like, who here thinks that homosexuality is okay? And, like, a good, like, half the class, like, more than half the class raises their hand. I was one of the last people to raise my hand. Because I was like, everyone knows that I'm gay. Like, everybody at this point already knows that I'm gay. I just don't...
You also kind of looked gay at this point.
At this point, like, I started to look a little bit more gay. Yeah. So I raised my hand. Somehow, out of all the people that raised their hand, he looks directly at me, and he goes, tell me why. And so I backed into a corner, and I'm like, oh my fucking god, are you joking me? So I froze. I froze, and I started stuttering, and I was like, well, luckily, that one person who is now a queer Christian influencer stands up and goes, is this necessary? Like, is this actually necessary?
Right.
Dang.
From total meltdown. And they came and checked up on me after class, too, which was really nice. But to sum all of that up, yeah, just, like, a lot of, like, really, really...
Well, and I had, like, a separate professor, and this happened to me as well. So I was in class, and I think he, like, waited to have this lecture until I was in class, because I was one of 7 people in this class. And it was for a brand new program. Geez, you had a lot of new programs at the time that we'd started there. It was for a brand new program. It was for, like global ministry, I think is what it was. And so it was about, like, how to talk to people about having the conversation of basically converting them to Christianity, which is cringy in and of itself. And so I had a whole class based on that, and I was one of 7 people in that class, and I think I had, like, looked at the syllabus and what we were covering, and I knew based on something in the syllabus that if I just missed a week of class, I would miss the lecture about homosexuality that I didn't want to be there for. So I missed a whole week of class just to avoid this. But I come back on Monday, and he still hasn't given the lecture. So he waited.
No.
He waited to give the lecture on homosexuality. So he does essentially the same thing that Angel's professor does, which is pull up images and pull up a lot of media that has a lot of just, like, gay representation. And I just am silent the entire time. Like, I don't say anything. But he ends the lecture with, at the end of the day, we all just need to understand that we need to love the sinner and hate the sin. And all of gay couples that even go to my church as a pastor, that I pastor at, and to this day, they would wrap their arms around me and tell me how much they love me as a pastor. But, they're still going to hell. And they know.
Oh my god!
What?
That's
And
awful.
Like, and he makes direct eye contact with me for the last "you're going to hell" statement. He makes direct eye contact with me, and I'm just like, "You're awful. You're an awful human. You need to stop this. You shouldn't be teaching.
Oh my god.
Those are just like probably the most controversial experiences that we've had around being gay.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had other a lot of just kind of microaggressional statements.
Yeah, I think the general vibe was microaggressions, but there were a couple of macroaggressions.
Yeah, macroaggressions. That's a good way to
Super
put it.
macro.
Direct aggressions.
yeah, just straight out aggression.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty much that. I think for us, we had, while you, I think, lost a lot of your friends because of this, I actually ended up making a lot of really good friends as I walked around majors. And a lot of these people ended up being really, really affirming and really, really progressive. And we ended up, and one of them, his wife that he married at the time that we actually both knew, they actually came out as non-binary as well. So it was really cool to have, he has bi-wife energy, which was so fun to see at Grand Canyon University.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's pretty much the experience we had. And I would like to say too, even though we came out publicly about 2 years into our program, we didn't ever say anything to our professors at that time. Because if we had come out to our professors, and if anyone had outed us to our professors, we were at risk of losing our degree. Our degree could
Oh my gosh.
have been kicked out of the program at that point. So
That's stupid. It's also none of their business either.
Yeah,
That's
Making their business, but
they do. It's so
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah. So we also moved on campus. I think off of campus at around that time as well. So we were only going to campus to literally go to school.
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Yeah, I think it did. It helped us kind of cope with it, because then we could go home at the end of the day and have dinner together and be removed from that atmosphere, which I think made it beautiful.
Yeah. I completely forgot to talk about how we used to go to a church that marketed itself as a really progressive church. And, yeah. We laugh at it now because it's really stupid.
Oh no. Oh no.
It was one of those covert progressive churches that's oh well we welcome everybody, but that does not mean that they accept everybody, but they welcome everybody, right?
So
we
unclear.
didn't really know the difference at that time. We actually, before we even started going to this church, met with the pastors, and we were like, hey, we're a gay couple, we have a YouTube channel, we advocate for this, we're not intending on changing anytime soon, but we're looking for a space that we can come and serve at. And specifically, I've been a worship director before, so I would like to be in a similar position. I'm not asking to be a worship director here, but I am asking, if I'm going to serve, I would like to be appropriately placed.
Well,
and the same thing with...
And logistically, you needed an internship.
Oh, yeah, and I needed an internship to graduate, too, so... And they were like, yeah, come on, and we'll start you off playing acoustic guitar in the background, but only for, a couple weeks, and then we'll move you up. Well, a couple weeks turned into, a couple of months, and I didn't want to push, but then eventually they had this songwriting retreat because their worship team wrote their own music. And I was really excited because I wanted to write with them because I am a songwriter, and
really good song.
Thank you. And I was really excited, and also because I wanted to bond more with the worship team, and everybody on the worship team was hyping up too. They were like, "Oh, we're so excited to have you come on this retreat with us, and it's gonna be so fun." And 4 days before I'm supposed to go on this retreat, I get a text message from the pastor, basically being like, hey, actually, we can't have you go on this retreat because we haven't had enough conversations about the gay thing.
Oh my gosh.
That was actually the catalyst for the One Frontier.
This is sort of going back a bit, but Angel, could you define reincarnation for, I don't know, it's possible there are listeners who might not know what it is, and then also it would be interesting to hear what sort of practices outside of Christianity that you guys have discovered and incorporated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't know what reincarnation is, I'll just say, what I believe it to be, and that is, in some way, shape, or form, when we die, our soul or our spirit, or whatever you like to believe that you have, gets somehow recycled into a different life, a different body. I don't know if it is human to human, or if it's human to animal or plant, or if there's other possibilities, or science person. But Nicole and I are both science people, as you heard in our bios. We do a lot with like wildlife conservation and biology and things like that. And when you look into science and about, you know, biology and how the world works, you discover that a lot of the world is recycled. Like, a lot of the world reincarnates itself. And so if you believe in a soul, which I do, it only makes sense to believe that if all matter is recycled, then why wouldn't your soul be? So that's kind of why I believe in that. But aside from believing in reincarnation, recently we started to add in a lot of like other practices, and I think you probably should talk about this one, but because I think the biggest one we've added in recently have been like more witchy practices.
Nice.
Mostly has been on Nicole's end. I'm not so much into it, but I'm getting there. Like, I just recently was pulled on board to tarot cards, but it took me a while to get there. So, do you want to talk more about that?
Yes. Yeah. So, one of the ways that I was able to kind of retune into like my personal spirituality is actually through doing a lot of practices that are really, honestly, just like based in witchcraft. And I try to be just really, really, really intentional about pulling from open practices whenever I do that. And I really want to emphasize that for anyone who might be interested in doing the same thing, to really do your research. And that's a really intimidating term to say, just do your research on witchcraft before you indulge in it. But also do your research on the indigenous practices that it really pulls from, and make sure that you're pulling from the right sources in that way. And so what I do a lot of is I do a lot of like tarot and like oracle stuff for me. So instead of doing like a daily devotion in the morning, I actually pull like a daily card from one of two decks that I use. And so I have a deck that's like kind of more like affirmations. That's like, this is kind of where you're at in life today. And then I have another deck that will kind of call me out on my bullshit and say, you need to turn some stuff around today, or it could get not great. You're heading in a path that's maybe not good for you. Right? And so I tend to take this with a grain of salt and kind of say, you know, where's my middle ground? What makes sense for this? Am I reaching with this? Is it not practical? Or does it ring really true, and does it really resonate? And how do I practice this today? So that's one of the ways that I do that, is just by doing like a daily like just like little tarot reading in the morning.
I think also like we started doing like a lot of like lighting candles and setting intentions, which was something that I really, really liked.
Especially, it really worked for you, didn't
my God. I just recently, went on this like crazy career journey. Like, it started in March.
Really?
When we lit a candle. And we set an intention, and we manifested this on a full moon a couple of months ago. In March, we had this conversation about like how, okay, like what are we doing with our lives? We've always wanted to like actually officially be in wildlife conservation, and in like, I've always wanted to be a wildlife filmmaker and stuff like that. I'm like, I'm not getting any younger, so like, why aren't we chasing after this dream that we both have? And so at that point, we had just begun to introduce this practice of like lighting candles and like kind of just like sitting with each other and like speaking out affirmations and setting an intention and thanking God for like this intention and things like that. And so we did that with this, and we kept doing that like every couple of nights and stuff. And we did it with the moon cycles.
And we did it with the moon cycles, not like every single night, but like we did it with like moon cycles and like any time that we felt led to do it as well. And now I work for a production company that makes wildlife documentaries as an editor, which is like it's literally my dream job. So I landed my dream job in like a couple of months after that. So that was a little crazy.
That's incredible.
There's that, and have we introduced any other like practices that?
I will say that like from a mental health perspective, like I have a little bit of a background in mental health, and one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that like it gives me time and space to really figure out things and process things that maybe were brought up in therapy, or that's some things that I've been working through. So what I really like about it is like every full moon, like I go and I light a candle intentionally, and I let go of all of the things that are no longer serving me, so that I can enter this next like phase of life with clear intentions, like with what Angel said, and knowing that like I'm doing my best to better myself, and knowing that like, okay, I light a candle and like I burn a piece of paper, and like okay, I'm letting go of all those things, this is also, for me, an opportunity to work on my mental health. So I will
Absolutely.
then go and talk with my therapist about these things and say, hey, I'm really trying to work on this. What do you think about it? And we'll talk through it together. And that has been so helpful. And it also provides me a space, you know, this candle that I have burns for like 2 or 3 hours, right? So sometimes I'll just dedicate that entire 2 to 3 hour space to just journaling and working through those things that I want to let go of and processing.
Yeah.
So from a from a mental health perspective, oh my gosh, it's been really, really great for me personally. And from a spiritual perspective, I feel like really in tune with like my intuition. Like I feel comfortable talking to Jesus again, and I feel comfortable like going and meditating more and just having a really, really, really like broad spiritual practice and practicing in a way that feels intuitively correct for me as well. So it's brought, for me, it's brought like a really, really nice framework for the kinds of spiritual, mental, and like physical connections that I want to have with the people around me, which has been great.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I think a lot of times people believe you can't have it all. Like if you are someone who's very focused on mental health from a therapeutic standpoint, a lot of times people will kind of ignore the spiritual aspect of being able to light the candles and set intentions and everything. Or a lot of Christians, though that being said, I've met a lot more Christians that do practice certain aspects of witchcraft now, which is cool, broadening the horizons. But it's like you can only have one. You can either be a Christian that prays all the time, or you can set intentions and light candles and burn incense, or you can focus on the mental health science. Like you can't have all of them. And I think it's important to note that you can. There are ways to find balance in all of them. It's, I think, however you find your peace and connect with the divine.
Yeah, I think that like, I mean, I remember hearing a lot in Christianity, like, oh, you can't cherry pick, like your belief systems. And in my head, I'm like, well, why not? It's your belief system. Like, you should be able to do whatever you want.
You don't just stick with what resonates.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that like so many of those practices that you just mentioned are things that like in Christianity, or at least in like different in a variety of traditions, like lighting candles is a very like liturgical high church thing, you know. And like I don't know. I also, when you were talking about the way that you did tarot, it sounds similar to like as if you were reading scripture. Like reading scripture for me can sometimes call me out on my bullshit and also be a sort of affirmational thing. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that there are actually a lot of similarities, and if you look at like a lot of like Christian tradition, a lot of it can be also, people aren't going to like that I'm going to say this, and I know that. It can be also interpreted as a form of witchcraft, like
communion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't mean this in a bad way. Like, good for you.
Yeah.
You're connecting with the deity that like you worship, that you feel really connected with. You guys have a good relationship. Awesome. You're reaffirming this relationship once a month. I do that too. I light a candle on the full moon and I meditate. But like, you're literally eating the body and blood of Christ.
Yeah.
You're gonna tell me that that's not a little witchy. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the things that helped me feel at peace about it too. Whenever I was thinking about this, is I was like, well, people light candles whenever they pray to people in Catholicism, so I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just interesting, the overlap and a lot of like the crossovers that there are, I think, with these kind of like really practical ideas as well.
Yeah, and like I think that like how I like to view it too is like there's this, I mean, like we can see this in the queer community, that there are so many different kinds of people, right? Like people are so diverse, and I like to use the word queer because like it represents the queer community to like showcase how much diversity there is amongst people. And different people live different lifestyles and require different like things within that lifestyle. So it only makes sense that like in your spirituality, even if you believe like generally the same, like general, like if you worship the same deity, your practices are not going to be the same as like every other person, because you have different daily needs, you have different things that you are going to connect with better. And I personally believe that like because God makes us all so different, that he's going to speak to us differently. And so there's going to be different ways that God wants to connect with us and things like that. And I think that once I started believing that and really understanding that, exploring different like spiritual practices and stuff like that, like it not only became so much easier, but I feel like just like my connection that I have with God has just been so deepened since then.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I have like a more like authentic connection, and I'm not sort of limited to just these specific ways that were like prescribed to me by the church of like you can only connect with God in these 3 ways, and then that's
I know. And I had
anything outside of this.
I had so much guilt about like, oh, I'm not reading my Bible every day, like that's so bad. And it's like,
oh yeah,
it's fine that I don't have time to read the Bible every day. Like, you know, I shouldn't feel bad about it. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I'm still just as much of a Bible nerd as I ever was. I just am like, it's okay if I don't do that ever. I don't want to, and that's okay. Like,
yeah. I remember always being told like, oh, you don't pray enough, or like you should be like you don't pray enough, you should be praying more. Have you prayed about this? Why haven't you prayed about this? And it's like I feel weird having to justify that because it is such a personal connection.
When I first like started deconstructing, like part of my deconstruction is that it was like prayer isn't working. You know, it just was like, it felt like putting this Band-Aid on a gushing wound in like the midst of all the shit I was going through. I was like, what do I do?
Yeah. I think it's worth mentioning that you guys both said should. Like there's so much shame associated with what you should and shouldn't do based on what you are doing, right? Like you guys both said, like I've said this too, but you know, I should be praying more, I should be reading my Bible every morning. And it's just like this underlying level of like, if you're not doing everything the right way, then you should feel bad about it and you should feel guilty for it. And I think whenever I was deconstructing a lot of my like faith and sexuality and figuring out how that could work, I had a really hard time differentiating between the shame that was given to me and the shame that I actually like, and the actual like maybe guilt, conviction, I don't even know if convinced me and what I actually felt was wrong, because what I felt like was wrong was oftentimes like, oh, like, you know, I said the wrong thing to someone, right, which is like where you should feel a sense of remorse, versus like shame, which is oftentimes kind of given or passed down to you, right? And it's like it's just noticing. For me, that was such a huge part of me deconstructing, is recognizing that like whether or not I read my Bible or I read tarot every day, doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm doing the thing that I feel is most aligned with my like self and most aligns me with like my highest purpose and my highest good, and allowing those things to build me up every day and make me a better person, frankly. Or allowing myself to do the work and providing myself means to do the work, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's that notion of don't knock how you end up connecting with the divine or connecting with yourself. Like don't knock like telling people don't knock the way you do it, that other people do it. It's just as long as you get there somehow or are on that journey.
And I think for me, sort of bouncing off of what you said, Nicole, I think like listening to my body has been like a part of my spiritual practice, like because like, you know, it's like so you need different things on different days sometimes, you know, and so it's like you have to just like figure it out by like actually being in tune with your body, which of course is something that in evangelicals we were not allowed to do.
That's a big one.
I was actually talking with someone else about this, who's coincidentally from the Calvary Chapel denomination, and she was saying that one of the biggest things that has happened is this idea that like the normalization of doing yoga for people who are within Christianity, because it's allowing them to listen and feel into their bodies in a way that is safe in a semi-spiritual community or spiritual space, and how that has really like revolutionized how they feel and think about their body and just allowed them to take those first steps. And I think that's, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about it. My thoughts are just that that's amazing. And
that is amazing.
Feeling into that for the first time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because like I started doing yoga a few years ago and I was really consistent with it, and sadly I haven't been as consistent with it in a while. But I just remember that was really helping me find that peace and be able to, again, sort of connect with God in a very different way. And I had always kind of grown up hearing like, ooh, yoga's a sin and it's like devil worship, which is like, in what universe is this? Oh, okay, whatever. But it was just like, no, like I wish that it was talked about more in church settings as a way to connect with God and to connect with ourselves. And also it's just like good for you. Like from a singing standpoint, my breath control was so good when I was doing yoga.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Absolutely. Like I know that I feel the best. Like I always notice that like I feel more in tune and connected with my body after yoga, and I also know that I feel good because I'm doing something that I know is like, or that like my body feels good doing. Like for me, yoga always feels good, which is why I really like doing it. Like it's not like running, Rosen. I don't like running, so
Same.
it's not like working out in a way that's like really difficult, and some people like that, but I like to just move really fluidly and intentionally, and yoga allowed me to do that and to find like a sense of like spiritual community as well, which was really, really nice. But yeah, I don't know, I think that that's like a really powerful tool as well, and I would say I would argue that for me yoga is also a spiritual practice.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It's just not one of my spiritual practices, but it's
Sure.
one of yours.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, April, how, whenever you say, like, that, you know, getting into your body to sort of, like, discern what you feel is, like, right or working with you, like, if you're okay with me asking, like, how has that helped you, and where are you at with that now?
In like October 2020, there was this like sense of building dread as the election was approaching, you know, and so I was sort of examining this, and I was like thinking about how I was going to process and deal with the election approaching, especially because like the 2016 election was a source of like deep trauma for me because I had a relative that died that night.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was just definitely a bad day. It was the day my deconstruction just hella kick-started with that.
Yeah.
And as I was like sort of, I think I definitely just like sometimes was like, okay, like what should I do on election night to like take care of myself and my being and everything? And it turned out that like I just realized that I was like, I can't watch the election results on like the Tuesday night because I didn't want to like have my body relive 2016 where like I had my eyes glued to like screens for like hours.
Yeah.
So I told my housemates that because I was doing a service corps year, so I was living in a house with 7 people, and most of them wanted to watch the election results. And that was okay, but then luckily one of my housemates was like, oh, we can go over to my workplace, I have the key, and so we can just sit there together and like we can get pizza and we can just chill. And so that was really nice that I just was like, I had to just completely, I just isolated myself from the news and everything, just was able to chill, journal, draw, and that was really good. And then I was able to like check the results the next morning and not feel as afraid or, you know, filled with dread, so.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Yeah, absolutely. I resonate with that a lot. I think, in the same way, like whenever that is like a big moment for me, I'll actually do like a similar thing where I'll just kind of like take a break from it until that moment and like do what I can to like maybe mentally prepare for it or mentally not prepare for it. Like just take a minute to just not think about it at all and mentally rest so that as that time approaches, I can just be more fully like myself and present in that moment. So I love that you do that.
Also, in my explanation, I forgot whether I did this, but I normally also refer to my body with like my pronouns, she and her. It's a good thing to do because your body is not an it. So.
Ooh, yeah.
I like that a lot. I feel like you're like a Jamie Lee Finch person.
Yes, I read You Are Your Own. I recommend it to like everyone.
Totally, yeah. I haven't read her book, but I do follow her on Instagram, and I have listened to a bunch of her podcasts, and I always really, really love what she says about, you know, the connection that she has with her body and how her body is, like you said, it's like, it's not it's a person. Your body is a person.
Yeah.
And by building your connection with your body and working with her or working together, you guys can sort of that is both of your guys' best interests in mind. So, and it's interesting how that manifests. Like, I would think, and that it manifests as, like feeling into your body during those really stressful times and acknowledging that. And then at the same time, also acknowledging that, like, part of, like, I don't know, I guess, like, taking care of your body is also, like, nourishing it. So, like, cooking food, not with the intention of, like, okay, now I have to eat this, but, like, with the intention of taking care of this other person that you're going through life with. And I think that that's a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to answer this, Angel, but I'm curious if you've thought about that and what pronouns your body uses.
Actually, I was like, as we were talking about it, I was just thinking about it.
Oh yeah, you haven't talked about your gender journey, Angel.
I have not yet. It was the spicy topic. No, regarding to the naming your body thing, I haven't really. I think that I haven't taken amazing care of my body, and I think that's a new thing for me. Like, I just recently started, like, surfing, and that's the first exercise I've like really ever done. So and I've been cooking for myself better lately and stuff like that. But I'll have to think on that, like what pronouns I would use for my body. But
It's interesting.
Yeah, we could chat about my gender though. Whatever questions you have, fire them at me.
Like, in comparison to your sexuality journey, like, was there anything similar? Was there anything different? Like, was there anything... I guess, I'm just curious to know. Like, was it happening around the same time? Curious to know.
The gender journey for me and so much more emotional and so much more complex than my sexuality journey was. Because I think that for me, sexuality felt really easy. At least it felt really easy in comparison to gender. Like, I don't know, like, going through and, like, discovering my sexuality was just, like, it just seems like a default to me. Like, I was just like, okay, yeah, this is hard, this is difficult to come to terms with, but, like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, I'm a lesbian, haha, like, everyone knew, you know, like, but in terms of my gender, I think it was something that, like, I think that I saw so far back in my childhood. Like, not everybody can see signs in their childhood of that they were, like, a different gender than they were born as, but for me, like, I do, and I see really intense signs, and also just, like, I think because I do identify as, like, gender fluid, it's a little difficult for me. It was really hard for me because there's parts of me that I identify with that are more cis, and then there's parts of me that I identify with that are definitely not. And so I think there was a period of, like, maybe, like, 5 years maybe where, like, in the background I was like, am I trans? No, I'm cis. Well, am I non-binary? I don't know. Like, and so I, like, kept kind of bouncing between like, all of these. And then, in 2019, I think, is when I, like, finally was like, okay, I'm gender fluid, and that's just how it has to be. And then from that point, when I finally, like, said it out loud, and I waddled out from the bedroom out into the living room, and I was like, Nicole, I think I'm gender fluid. And from that moment, I have been kind of just going on this journey of, like, discovering myself, and it triggered, like, a complete life uprooting for me that is still going on. And so part of that was moving to California. Part of that was completely overhauling my friend group. Part of it was changing how I dress. I cut my hair off.
Yes, I thought it was so interesting to see your hair get progressively shorter.
Yeah, and, like, for those who are listening who, like, didn't know me,
you had long ass hair.
I used to have hair down to my ass, and I had hair like that forever. Like, I never cut my hair. I had my hair down to my butt in kindergarten. It got cut into a bob once in, like, 2nd grade, and then from that moment, I never cut my hair ever again. And so it was like, and my hair to me is a very, I'm really connected with my hair. It's, like, super thick. Whenever it is long, I look like Merida from Brave. Like, it kind of consumes me. And it's like its own entity. Like that to me is
your
like
body or your hair has pronouns.
my hair has pronouns. Yes, it's my hair. But so cutting it off for me was really a deep thing. It was necessary for me to do that, and I think that really propelled me forward in a lot of like other aesthetic choices and things like that. And I started this gender journey being like, oh, I'm never gonna go on hormones, and I'm never gonna like get any surgeries and stuff like that, and both those things have gone out the window. Like I do plan on like getting surgery, and the hormone thing is still like iffy, but like I'm leaning towards it a lot more now, and it's just it's been really interesting, but it's also been really emotional for me, like, and I think that's just because it's it feels deeper than sexuality, and that's not the case for everybody. Like for you know, other people it might be the same amount of deepness and emotionalness, but for me it just feels so much deeper, and it's really, I don't know, it's been interesting.
I think like from a spouse perspective, what I do remember about this journey versus whenever you were figuring out, you know, what part of like what the label was that you wanted to choose for your sexuality, that came, I think, pretty easily for you to like go through and accept. But for your gender, I remember this was like months of like conversations, just like casually bringing up like, hey, you know, like I'm feeling like I don't really identify with my body, but I don't know what that means, and I don't know, you know, does that mean I'm trans? Like you were saying before, you know, does that mean that I'm trans, but I feel so aligned with like certain aspects of myself that are feminine, and so I feel like there was a lot more confusion, and there was a lot more questioning that had to do with your gender, and I wonder if that's whenever you align with your gender identity, if that's why you were like, I cannot afford to live inauthentically in any other part of my life.
Oh, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, no. Like, and like I said, like it was a complete life overhaul. Once I realized that I wasn't cis, like it just triggered all of these things in my life, like had to change. And I think that it was obviously for the better. Like I'm in like an amazing place now, but it definitely was a little complicated for a little bit. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just hard being in a society that is so binaried, and also being in a belief system or religion, and especially in the school environment both of you are in, that is also very binaried. The best way I think I could describe it almost, it's like you kind of end up gaslighting yourself. Like, I feel this way, but no, I don't. Like, I never felt that way before. Like, and so I can't even imagine what that journey has been like, and definitely grateful that you have come this far with that journey.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I even had, like, I think that for me, my like my middle school and high school years were like years that I like was thinking about it, and then when I went to college and like had to deal with all the bullshit because of my sexuality, I got kind of scared off, I think, of spending time and dedicating time to think about my gender. And then when I graduated, it all just came flying back. Like once I was kind of taken out of that like unsafe environment, it like really hit me full force like a train. Like I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I think, I don't think I could have handled going through a sexuality and gender awakening in GCU. I don't think that would have worked out really well.
No way.
So one of the things that I'm curious to know more about is sort of the journey of you guys creating the One Frontier in your YouTube channel, and like I guess what you think about those endeavors like now going forward.
Yeah. I mean, the One Frontier, I think, is one of the greatest things that one of the things that I'm like the most proud of that I've ever done and ever will do. It started off like we wanted to create a small group at GCU, because we started meeting other people at GCU who were gay, who were closeted, who were like us, just like desperately needing community, because they were starved of it. Like we had nobody, and there was no place where we could all gather together and talk about these struggles and these things. So it started off with us trying to create a small group, and it was hard because there's obviously a lot of red tape at a Christian university to create a group for gay people, and so we like realized logistically like it wouldn't really work out. And at the time, I was super into YouTube. Like I've been on YouTube since its creation. I've been a YouTuber I used to have an animated series that I made on YouTube,
Oh my
which is
God.
now all privated, so you can't look it up.
Aw. I was about to say, can we link it to the show notes?
Things, so. But I knew the vlog format really well. I was really familiar with it, and also, of course, I was on lesbian YouTube. I was obsessed with lesbian YouTube. I watched Allie and Stevie Bobby and Shannon and Cami, and
I would almost go so far as to say that like Allie Hills was like one of your sexual awakening like moments.
probably. So then like because of that I was like, oh well, what if we just started a YouTube channel?
Yeah.
So then we did, and that's kind of how it started. It started to kind of take off a little bit, and then Nicole and I are both like really outdoorsy people, and so we wanted to create something that kind of combined all of the intersections, right? Like our faith, our sexuality, and also our love for the outdoors. And so we were like, oh, what if we created like an organization that kind of like services all three of those areas? And that's kind of how the One Frontier started. So from the YouTube channel, we started the One Frontier, and the One Frontier, when we first started it, I think we had this grand idea to open up a camp one day. Like that was kind of like the initial grand idea of like, oh, if we build up enough funds and things like that, it'd be really cool to like buy a big property and in the forest and offer it as like a place where like groups could go to and rent it out and things like that.
Yeah, and something that was like really, really important to us was sort of giving kids and teenagers and young adults the opportunity to go and have like your church camp experience, but in like a fully affirming space.
Which is like that's something that is like a heart sort of dream of mine. Like that whole idea. Like eventually, part of me is like if I can somehow like rent out because the church camp that we just rented it out for a week, and normally it's actually like a science camp, or like a science major sort of camp thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, but I figure I'm like someday I'm gonna rent out that camp and like hold a like queer youth camp. Like I would love that. Somehow.
We were talking about this, and we were just like talking about how it's so frustrating that like there are like kids and teens who are in these schools who, if they are out, they often get denied the ability to go to summer camps and to schools. Oh, did I say schools? In churches. Kids and teens in churches, if they're out, they often get denied to go on these summer camps and church camps, which arguably are one of the most formative times of your spirituality. Like I mean, even in high school, when I was like at the tail end of high school, when like my friends like were starting to bring me to their church, like I would go on these church like camps, and they were life changing. And obviously, there's a lot of like. There's a lot to be said for like the emotional. Like,
cry night.
Cry night.
But that being said, it's still like we truly believe that like nature specifically is such a catalyst for spirituality. Because
absolutely,
you are within raw creation, and there's something very like spiritual about that. And to be denied that because of your sexuality or your gender identity is like really stupid. So that's kind of why we started it, and it went from this like hope to having a physical camp. It evolved into kind of like an umbrella for a lot of different kinds of projects. So the YouTube channel is obviously one of those. Then we met up with Reverend Bailey Bronner of Mission Coast United Methodist Church after we moved to San Diego, and we teamed up and started The Voyage, which is a meetup for queer people, and that has been really fun. And then from that, then we did The Voyage Retreat, which is really cool. We've had 2 years of it so far, and both years have just been like so fun. And then like the adventure guide and Tarians, like my band, like a lot of things kind of came out of it, and it was like a really, really cool season. And I think that when we started the One Frontier, there wasn't like a whole lot of organizations out there. There was maybe like QCF and Reformation Project, and that was kind of it. And it's really cool to see, like, as time has gone on, that there are so many organizations out there now, and there are so many resources for queer people, and there are so many places for people to find community, and it's really great. And I think that it's really great that those are out there, because we're kind of feeling the end of the One Frontier a little bit.
Yeah, I think
Gotcha.
it's not even, I would say maybe the end. I think it's more like we talked about earlier in actually this podcast, we're transitioning into a different phase of life where we're still in nonprofit work and we're still really passionate about connecting people with nature and things like that and allowing that to be a spiritual space. At the same time, we feel that because there are so many organizations out there specifically for queer Christians, and because we're not technically queer Christians anymore, we're comfortable sort of letting them lead that charge.
They're doing it better, quite frankly.
Yeah.
They have more resources, they have
more funding,
they have more ability to do this stuff, and they're creating some really great spaces. And I think that it's we feel comfortable kind of passing that off, passing the torch a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we'll always have a heart for this community, and we'll always be super passionate about it.
We'll always be in it too.
Yeah, I just think moving forward, truly where our passion is now and where our heart is now is in conservation and
the science world. There's still is I'm not gonna say no, sorry, let me rephrase. There still is not as many spaces for queer people in STEM as there should be. Especially in conservation. And so we were just talking about this yesterday, actually, how we find it kind of funny. No matter where we go, it seems like God is always hey, you need to make a space for yourselves here.
Yeah. She's always hey, just let you know, you're here and you're probably gonna be queer people, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And here's how you're gonna help the other queer people who are gonna follow you. And that's a really, really unique place to be in every situation that we've been through.
So that's kind of where we're at with it.
Absolutely.
That's
It's
really
amazing.
cool. But I know that the voyage is something that will still be continuing, right?
Yes,
Okay,
don't
yeah.
worry. The
Because
voyage will
it's
still
through
continue.
it's technically through Mission Hills, UMC, and Bailey.
Yeah,
and,
it's technically through Mission Hills. There are going to be some changes coming to it, nothing super drastic, but yeah, the voyage is something that is still going to be there, that we're still going to be a part of. The voyage has turned into kind of the voyage has kind of taken over the One Frontier, is kind of how I'm going to put it. It's just, the community grew so far beyond what we
because in a way because of the pandemic, right? Because you guys went online, and actually I remember seeing for the first time an Instagram post that was we're gonna be on Zoom, and I was oh my god, I get to go.
It's funny too because I was introduced to the voyage from April, and then funny enough, going to the voyage retreat this year online, there was quite a bit of crossover from that and the QCF conference. There was quite a bit of crossover, and I'm just wow, it's a small community, but also wow, there's I'm glad that there are communities that exist. Yeah,
and that's another reason why we're okay with kind of putting an end to the One Frontier, is because it's kind of just the voyage now. That's really what it has turned into. And yeah, April, like you said, because of the pandemic and because we had to go online with it, when we first started the voyage, it was an in-person every other week meetup in the, not basement, but in the extra room at Mission Hills. And there was maybe 5 people that would come, maybe 10 max.
Yeah.
And then now it's turned into this big online community of people from all different places of the world, all different religious backgrounds, all different belief systems, and it's so much more amazing than we ever could have imagined it. And I think that more time needs to be dedicated to the voyage and to the voyage community, rather than our YouTube channel. I think that you can go on YouTube and look up a billion other YouTubers who will be talking about the same thing. The voyage is something that is specific and special and different, that needs more of our time and focus. That, and then also our conservation stuff. But yeah, so it's just been interesting to see how the pandemic has kind of flipped a lot of things around for us, but not necessarily in a bad way, in kind of a good way.
Yeah, in a really good way.
Yeah, and I think it's also cool too because there's so many more resources available now, and because so many affirming churches and organizations are online, same thing, people from all over the world have that access. And with Pastor Bailey, she's on TikTok. She's one of the TikTok progressive pastors. And I know that there are people who have come to the voyage from that specifically. And there's a whole community of progressive clergy and progressive Christians on TikTok, which is incredible. I wish that I had that when I first came out 5 years ago. Because I was do gay Christians exist? Like, I just didn't know. And then I discovered Vicky Beaching. I was like, okay, there's one. There's one out there. Yeah.
Yep.
And then it turns out there's a bunch of us.
Right. Yeah, the one frontier, I think, it existed in an era of people Googling, are there queer Christians?
Yeah.
Now I think most of the world knows that. Like, I think that a good portion of the world knows that queer Christians exist because we fought for our visibility, and we're still fighting. But I think we've gotten to a point where most people know that they exist, but they just need more help with thinking about, like, how does that work? And I think the frontier existed for a previous generation who didn't necessarily know that they existed. And now, like, The Voyage and other spaces like The Voyage, and also, like, Bailey on TikTok and, like, other people like Bailey, this is for the current generation, post-pandemic and post this new wave of information that came out from this pandemic. It's just so fascinating to see how, like, information so accessible can, like, change a whole generation.
Yeah, and that also makes me grateful too, because I remember when I was first Googling, like, gay Christians, the things that came up were, like, conversion camp links.
Oh, good God.
And that is not the case anymore.
You know, for me,
like, things,
it was...
it's...
For me, it was, like, it was, you know, at the time it was 2017, so it was called Gay Christian Network, but, yeah, that was, like, the QCF website, basically, that I found. And it was, like, on the first page of Google, so they, like, had to do shit to get their analytics up.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. I can't even imagine what they had to do to get their website up there. Because, that must have had to pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
Speaking of social media, where can people find you and what you guys do on the internet?
So you can find us at our individual Instagrams. My handle is Ankle Morris, which is an old nickname from high school. And what is yours?
Mine is Coley Jean, so COLIEJEAN.
Yeah, and then technically you can also obviously find us at Angel and Nicole on YouTube. We have our whole archive of vlogs and videos on there, but we are on a little hiatus right now, just figuring out what we're going to do with that channel going forward. But there's still good stuff on there, so go and watch it. And then I'm on TikTok every now and then. I go through seasons, but same username on TikTok, Ankle Morris.
Nice. And are there any endeavors that our listeners can support that you're involved in, like whether it's through conservation or filmmaking, anything like that?
Not necessarily at the moment. I think if anything, like if you're interested in finding a community, like check out The Voyage, because The Voyage is still something that like we're super passionate about, and there are going to be some changes that are coming to it, but they're going to be really good changes that I think are going to be beneficial for everybody. And also, it's just such a unique, beautiful, wonderful community that I'm just so happy to be a part of, and it's a really good time. It's a very, like, every other week my soul is healed, like it's one of those kinds of nights. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
We're working on an outro song. This is just the placeholder. Yeah.
So that was incredible. It was amazing to just be able to hear from both of them about their faith journeys and spirituality and how they
and the different practices
come
that
to
was
the
really
conclusions.
interesting.
Yeah, and because again, I don't think there are a lot of now. There are, fortunately, as I think I talked about, like expanding my horizons and learning. Kevin Garcia, oh my goodness! And then there's also a Christian Tarot Instagram account now too, which a lot of people I know follow. But it was just really cool to be able to hear that firsthand from both Angel and Nicole and how they've integrated certain practices of witchcraft and spirituality into their faith. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah, we talked about a lot of cool things. It was very exciting. And speaking of exciting things, I guess we'll get into high of the week. So April, if you would like to start off, go right ahead.
Yeah, honestly, my high is that the first thing I did when I literally got up today was I listened to Semler's new EP, like the good queer Christian that I am.
Yes.
And, there are a lot of really cool songs on it, and particularly, like, something that I think a lot of queer Christians would be able to relate to is a song like Late Bloom. Wait, is it Late Bloom or Late Bloomer? I totally forget.
I think it was late.
But, like...
It just came out today, so it's fine.
They talk about their sort of... Semler talks about their experience of, like, you know, being very much closeted in high school, and then sort of embracing this idea of being like a late bloomer. That, yeah, I mean, the chorus, I'm just a late bloomer, I couldn't get here sooner, I'm just a late bloomer, feels like I barely grew up, baby bloom. And like the blooming part though is that, like, you know, even though it's sort of this idea of being late, but also that like you are flourishing, you know, like yeah. So
yeah, absolutely.
That was a good experience. So what about you?
My highlight of the week is I got a job offer this week. I'm going to be teaching an after-school drama program, which I'm really excited for because I interviewed with this job and I was like, oh, I hope I get it, but like it's okay if I don't, because I feel like the job hunt is so hard. It just sucks. So the fact that I was able to get this job and being able to talk to them in my interview about like my plans for the future, which ironically do not involve theater, they were very supportive of that. They were just like, that's incredible that like you're making this transition in your life, and I'm just really excited to be on board. I've gotten to meet the students. They seem awesome. I've gotten to meet the teachers, and they are fantastic. So yeah, I'm really excited. Also, homegirl's going to grad school, hopefully. So I'm very excited to be able to have another job that won't take up a ton of time, but it'll definitely help. So I'm really excited to start.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening. Please feel free to listen to us on wherever podcasts can be listened to. Rate and review on Apple Podcasts if you are so inclined. And if you would like to donate to our Patreon, you can, but you just being here and listening to us is just incredible. So thank you so much for that. And of course, follow us on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Please feel free to give us a follow, as well as giving Angel and Nicole a follow, and we will link all of their social medias in the show notes and whatnot. And yeah, thank you all so much for listening.
We will see you in the next episode where we are talking church experiences, you know, from the bad, the good, the beautiful, the ugly, and also our journeys to how we found church communities in the present. So yeah, we'll see y'all in a couple weeks.